You're listening to the Music Tech Teacher podcast, episode number 22. Welcome to the Music Tech Teacher podcast. Music tech tips, lesson ideas, advice, news, and interviews, especially for music teachers. Brought to you by midnightmusic.com.au. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Music Tech Teacher podcast. I'm Katie Wardrobe from Midnight Music. If you would like to access music tech lesson plans and hours of online training, such as my new GarageBand course or the new collection of super simple music tech lesson plans using free websites, which is something I'm working on right now, come and join me inside the Midnight Music community. Information about the community, plus a special offer for podcast listeners, can be found at midnightmusic.com.au/podcast offer. In this episode, I chat to George Hess, who is an American music educator who has spent most of his teaching life so far in the States and also in Singapore. You can find a list of the resources and links that we mention in the show notes for today's episode at midnightmusic.com.au/22. Now, I need to warn you that we had a few issues with George's audio, unfortunately, towards the end of the podcast. So for around the last 10 minutes or so, his voice gets a bit crackly. I've tried to do a little bit of cleanup on that part of the episode, and it's okay. It's not perfect, but I hope that it's good enough for you to continue to listen till the end. So I hope you enjoy this chat with George Hess. Today's guest is George Hess. George has been teaching music tech to tertiary students for around 25 years now. He taught jazz, technology and music theory at Central Michigan University and later technology and improvisation as an associate professor of music at the National University of Singapore. George is soon going to be starting a new job at Sunway University in Kuala Lumpur in Malaysia next month. And George is also a top jazz guitarist and a composer. And I was surprised to learn that George got his first passport at the age of 50, which can't have been that long ago, I'm sure. And he's filled 2 passports since. So he's up to number 3 at the moment, which is just phenomenal. So where have you been travelling, George?
Well, a lot of the traveling has to do with conferences, like coming to MTech in Australia.
Yeah, which is where I think that was the first time we met in person, wasn't it? So
that's right.
I was involved in organising this conference, which was fantastic, music, technology and education. And George was one of the presenters that applied and came across. So that was great. We got to catch up in person and meet each other for the first time. And where else?
Well, I've been through Europe, went to Egypt, all of Southeast Asia. Right now I'm in Phnom Penh, but I've been to China and Korea and Indonesia. So all of those countries, and then of course the U.S. And then it's just been a lot of traveling. Myanmar and Cambodia. I've done a lot of work teaching music and working with music educators there to try to help them develop their music education systems.
And how do you find it you're teaching in English most of the time, I'm presuming, and do you find it that it's easy to do that? Most people are speaking English in Southeast Asia, or not the case?
It's varying levels of English. Sometimes we need to have some of the students do some translation. I try to learn some of the language so that I can at least, show that I'm interested. But other times I've just had to develop different technology solutions, really. One of the first things that led me to doing flipped classrooms had to do with the fact that my students at NUS were largely from mainland China, and their level of English was pretty poor. And so if I did a lecture, they didn't get every other word. Oh. And so by recording the videos and providing them with the lectures online, they were able to watch it as many times as they wanted, and then they eventually would get all the words.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And presumably their English improved over time as well, I guess.
Well, definitely. And a lot of it had to do with the conservatory insisting upon it. But when the conservatory is very new, it's only 11 years old. And so when it first started, we were taking any students we could get. And so a lot of the students that we got from China just simply didn't speak English.
Wow, that's just crazy. It must have been stressful for them as students having to try and learn. I mean, conversational English or something other than your native language is one thing, but to actually study in another language, I would imagine, is really difficult.
We are, as far as we know, YST was the only conservatory in the world where the language of instruction was not the same language as most of the students' main language.
That's nuts. Oh, well, I suppose it's a self-selection process in a way. I mean, if they weren't prepared to do that in the first place, I guess they wouldn't have applied. So, I guess it's not a bad thing, and it would really force you to learn very quickly.
Yes, and some of them really picked it up, but there were a few that managed to get through without really speaking English at all.
Oh my gosh!
Fortunately, the Chinese culture is one of collaboration. They help each other.
That's a really good thing, and that works so well with technology. We'll talk a bit more about that later on. I'd love to just touch on, your early days with technology. I mean, I think, I've said in previous podcast episodes, I'm quite late to technology, really. People ask me for advice all the time and, people call me a technology expert, which is lovely. But, I wouldn't consider myself to be a technology expert, really, even though I immerse myself in it all the time. But, I didn't really grow up with it as such. But I think you did, it sounds like, from what you've told me about your background.
It's something like serendipity, really. I mean, everywhere I've gone, technology has just kind of followed me. So when I went to Berkeley in the mid '70s, one of the things that happened there is that they got their first electronic music lab with ARP Odysseys and 2600s and ARP 2500s, and they started offering classes in electronic music. And I thought, well, that sounds fun, and so I started taking classes then. And it's been kind of along with me since then. I'm a guitar synthesizer nut, and so I've been buying guitar synthesizers since the early '80s. Some of them were really monstrosities, but right now I have a wireless one by Fishman, a triple play that's just amazing. It has almost no latency.
Oh my gosh.
And it's MIDI. It's not a processor like the Roland devices. I'm really amazed at how well it works.
That's crazy. Wow.
And then I've done a computer-aided pop duo in the mid '80s. I was lugging around a big IBM PC, but where it really took off is when I went to graduate school, and the school I went to, Northern Colorado, got a huge grant from the National Endowment for the Arts, and they built a new wing just for music technology. And we had 3 labs and a beautiful recording studio and tons of Macs and things like that. But of course, they had no faculty to teach any of it.
Oh, that's so interesting.
And so it fell to the grad students the grad assistants that had some technology background, some that didn't have any technology background, and to learn it and to start teaching it. And so since I had already been doing it for a while, I got, pretty much involved with it.
Wow. So you kind of got the job by default in a way then. That's a good thing.
Well, like I say, it just kind of technology and I just kind of have been more on a parallel path, and we just kind of keep converging. But one of the things that happened at that school was that we ran one of the first really big music technology workshops in the summer, and it ran for about 8 or 9 years. But we had an amazing faculty, people like David Mash from Berkeley and Bo Tomlin, who was one of the earliest, one of the programmers of the DX7 when it first came out, and then people from Opcode and people from Finale and so on. So we had a really amazing faculty, and it was pretty, some pretty well-known people. And so it was an exciting program there.
And so was the focus of the workshops there performance-based mostly, or was it more about recording and creating music, as a composer with a computer instead of, recording performances?
Pedagogy wasn't that advanced back then, and that's kind of interesting. Really, it was just simply about teaching the software.
Yes.
Because people were afraid. I mean, we were teaching teachers. I mean, this is primarily who we were teaching, but there were a lot of other people too. But UNC was a teachers' college, so that was the primary audience. But it was really, a lot of step-by-step tutorials. And this is actually something that really had an effect on my pedagogical philosophy later on, because we were teaching classes, these step-by-step classes, and there was this one class, the finale class, that one of the teachers was teaching, and there were these two ladies, and he took them very calmly step-by-step through it, and when they were done, they thought, wow, this is the greatest class ever, and they walked away, they were just thrilled. Well, the next year, I got to teach the class, and the same two ladies came up, and I thought, well, okay, well, they want a refresher or something, and they want to, maybe they want a different point of view or something like that. And so anyway, they took my class, and I took them step by step through it, and they thought it was a great class, and they, very happy and everything, and left. Well, the next year I'm teaching the same class again, and who shows up again? The same two ladies. So I started to realize step-by-step tutorials don't work.
I know. I've had this same realization over time too. So what happened in the end? Did you switch what you were doing that third year around?
Not quite then, but it basically bells started ringing in my head, and that was when I started to look at project-based learning. And so I've been doing that for first time I really implemented a project-based class was in 1996, I think it was. And it was a complete disaster. But I persevered, and and I've continued doing it, and eventually even won an award for my project-based music technology class. It was all about the blues.
Excellent. And it's really funny because, I sort of found when I started to do workshops myself, it was a little bit the same for me. I was doing step-by-step stuff as well, but with notation software, for instance, a lot of Sibelius training in the early days for me. And I did find that it was so much easier to show a class a finished score which had, different things in it. So it might have a transposing instrument and then a vocal line with lyrics, and then there might be some some chords showing above the stave, and then a few other bits and pieces in it. And then I'd say, well, we're going to recreate this score. And as things come up, you are forced to learn how to create chords or how to put lyrics in, because it's in the score that you need to do. And that's how I learnt Sibelius myself. It was because I was doing paid jobs for people. And I think, I've mentioned in another chat I've done with someone else for another episode of this podcast, I ended up being an expert at one point in harp notation because I had to do a harp score, which drove me nuts. But, I was forced to learn it, and it was because it was a project that I had to do. So, it's just a great way to learn. You're forced to do it.
Well, it's the funny thing is that all of the experts learn that way.
Yeah. And you just don't realise until, I think, later down the track. And with my own workshops that I've been running, I think with other programs, even though I was doing that with notation, I was sort of teaching, this is a great interactive website and this is what it can do at the start. And then it morphed into, okay, someone would ask in a workshop, well, what can I do with the students with this website? And I'm like, oh, well, you could teach X, Y, Z, or this is the lesson you could run. And so then I ended up switching what I was doing and changing it to, here's a lesson that you can do, and this is the technology tool, one of the options that can help you do it. And so the blues, I think it sounds like probably your blues unit was a bit like that too. Such a better approach.
Yeah, it is. And so the goal is really, it gets back to we teach music.
Yeah.
And technology is a tool. And in fact, that's what it means, is tools. And there's a reason why we call it music technology, not technology music.
Yeah.
Music is what it's all about. And when you talk about music to particularly music teachers, they're much more receptive. Too often when you talk about technology, the eyes glaze over.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, we've both had that experience a lot, I think. And it's funny, I was sort of laughing to myself when you said that a lot of people doing that, that summer workshop were a bit scared of technology. And I don't think that's really changed very much. You would know that as well. The people are still a little bit scared of it too. But for me, it's all about, most teachers are not changing the types of things they're teaching each year. So the blues has featured as part of the curriculum in many countries for many, many years. And just the way that you teach it has perhaps shifted over time. And technology tools come along that help you to teach parts of that in a different way, and then, you know, you might change to be something different the next year. But, you know, there's always people teaching the blues. There's always people doing orchestral music like Peter and the Wolf and, you know, the Carnival of the Animals. I mean, those things don't change, and it just becomes about what technology might help you, if it does, teach that thing and get more out of the kids or whatever.
Yeah, a lot of it is about learning how to learn now.
Yes, yes.
You know, we don't. When I was going to school as a kid, it was all about memorization, and I had a great memory, so I was a great student. But we don't need to memorize very much anymore.
No, I know. You can look.
It can make you a more.
Yeah.
It can make you more efficient, but for the most part, I mean, we really don't have to remember. You know, like I know when Bach died, but I don't really need to know that anymore. I can find it on Google anytime I want.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the world my own kids are growing up in. And really, I don't feel like I need them to learn stuff. A lot, you know, some people get caught up in the, well, we did it this way when I was young and it served us well. And I think, no, it's not. I don't think it's so true anymore these days, because you just do have instant access pretty much most of the time to information. And, you know, you can use my brain cells, I always feel, just don't have room to remember everything. So I need to spend those brain cells on the really important things, you know, like how to apply stuff instead. And that becomes a better use of it.
It's pretty safe to assume that most students have access to the internet now.
Yeah.
That's probably one of the biggest changes in education in the last 10 years, because even as early as 10 years ago, it really wasn't something you could assume. But with smartphones and things like that, we know that they have the access to it. I'm in Cambodia, one of the poorest countries in the world, and everybody has a smartphone.
Wow, that's interesting. I was wondering about that, actually. That's fascinating, isn't it? Yeah, because, again, when I started running workshops, I could not assume that everyone had access to the internet at their school, and so I had to adjust what I was showing and doing. But nowadays, I just make that assumption. Things have shifted so much in the past few years.
Actually, the only thing that prevents the access to the internet are IT departments.
Yeah, that's right. I know. That's a massive struggle. And even you and I were talking before we hit record about, you know, our poor internet connections. So both of us are not in places which have great internet connections. I've just chucked my kids off the internet before I hit record so that the bandwidth wasn't too squeezed. So hopefully our services will hang on for the duration of this. But yeah, you're right. It's and it does become about that access. And it's funny because one of the solutions I'm often talking to people about, you know, those that are sort of afraid of technology, the biggest thing that I think is important is to have a contingency plan, because, you know, you can do anything you like, but the technology, you know, things go wrong. We all know that. So having a contingency plan of some sort, you know, whether it's a non-internet solution or pen and paper or something like that, if you were planning on using something technology involved.
Well, that's improved a lot. You know, I generally assume things are going to work now, but when I first started doing this back in graduate school, one of the things we did, we would pack up an entire lab of Mac SEs and SE30s, and we would haul it to a place and teach with them.
Oh,
and
man.
We actually took it to the Midwest Clinic in Chicago, which is this big, huge music conference, and we put them in these big crates and coffins that look like coffins, and shipped everything to Chicago, and went and taught workshops at the Midwest Clinic in like 1990.
Wow, that's nuts. That's crazy.
But, it was.
That's just crazy.
And there were times when. There was one time we shipped it. We went to it was the state MEA conference, and the conference venue didn't realize how much power we needed.
Yeah.
Okay, and so we didn't have the circuits weren't big enough, and so we turned everything on, and it turned everything off. And this went on for about the first half a day before they got around to actually giving enough a big enough circuit to handle it all. And so we were really tap dancing, you know, shadow puppets on the wall and stuff like that.
Yeah, I've had that experience once actually, and we have a mutual friend, James Humberstone, and he and I were working for Sibelius at one time, and we were running some workshops at a conference here in Melbourne, and we had a travelling set of laptops. I'm pretty sure I I hope I'm remembering correctly, but we had sort of road cases similar with laptops in that we would set up for workshops, because at that time you could not guarantee by any means that everybody had their own device with them. I mean, nowadays, again, I can easily make that assumption, bring your own device. But at that time, it was so unusual. There'd be one or two people in each workshop with their own laptop. And so we had this travelling set of laptops. And one day they just didn't turn up in time for the first session of the conference. And James and I were outside twiddling our fingers, like, please, sweat breaking out, waiting for this truck to arrive.
Well, but if I was doing it nowadays, I wouldn't even set up computers. I just tell everybody to bring their own and probably find a small portable MIDI keyboard to make sure that they could do some work. But,
exactly. And it's much better. I started running those sort of bring your own laptop workshops even slightly before everybody had them, had their own laptop always. And really it was because I found that teachers wanted to see things working on their own device, not in some fancy lab. Sometimes you'd run workshops in a beautiful lab that's set up at a school or a university or some other venue. And teachers thought that was great, but then they'd go back to their own school or own device and go, well, it worked there in this beautiful setup, of course, but not back on my own device. And now it's nice to have that experience where they see it working on their own thing, and it continues hopefully after they've left the workshop too. Yep. So tell me about the flipped classroom things that you've done with students and how that's worked.
Well, the flipped classroom is just simply you record your lectures, and then when they come to class, you work with them. You do workshops and different types of projects and things. And it kind of led into project-based learning. It works really well that way too. So I don't, with most of my project-based classes, which are most of my classes, I don't really do more than 5 or 10 minutes of talking to the whole class at any time. And instead, I basically post videos that are either instructional or most of the time they're modeling. I model how I do the project.
Yep, that's great.
And because I want them to actually learn how to learn, so I don't really want to answer all of their questions in my videos. Certain things that, they absolutely have to know, well, yeah, sure, I'll make sure that they have that. But there's also no point in reinventing the wheel, because I'll send them to YouTube for, if we're starting on logic, well, there's how many beginning logic tutorials are there on YouTube? Go find one.
So,
there's no reason.
So true. Yeah. And I've come to the same thing again over the years too. And handing out notes even to people, people want notes after workshops where you've talked live, but where are the handouts that we can take? And I used to create all these documents with how-to information in them. And then I thought, what on earth am I doing that for? That's the role of the software company, to do that. And there's, anyway, like you said, stacks of videos online, and there's many websites you can sign up for just basic how-to stuff. And it made no sense me doing that too. So it makes much more sense for us to talk about the application of the software and how you would do that.
And a lot of times what I do is I'll set up challenges for myself in the project.
Yeah.
And so I'll decide to do something I don't know how to do, and then I'll show them how I went about learning it.
Yeah.
And that
brilliant.
way, so I'm modeling learning rather than modeling software development. And of course they can look at what I learned how to do and they can go ahead and use it. But at the same time, they'll see how I figured out what it is I wanted to do and how I chose to do it. And that's really what I'm trying to show in the models.
That's
not
great.
So much.
Yeah, that's another step removed, isn't it? Another sort of step away from, the actual how-to. That's really good. That's really interesting. Yeah,
So
I should do more of that, I think.
It all works really well for me because, I don't really like teaching. I mean, I don't like standing up in front of a class and pontificating.
Yeah.
But I love learning. I love to learn. Yeah. And so in these projects, a lot of times what happens is the students kind of surprise me and they'll say, how do I do this? And my answer is, I don't know. Let's find out.
Yeah, great.
And they loved. And what was amazing to me is that they love this. I don't have to be the superstar, the expert in everything. I don't have to know everything. They enjoy learning with me.
Yeah, and it also opens up for, sometimes if I've had that situation, I ask the room, does anyone else know how to do that? Has anyone had that experience before? And again, particularly if it's kids, they love the opportunity to show off a bit of information. My own kids at home love that. Like if I say, look, do you know how to do this? And if they know the answer, wow, it's great. You know, that they get excited and proud that they can help you instead of the other way around all the time.
Yeah, if we run into a question like that, I often post it on our forums,
yes.
and our discussion forums, and say, okay, first person to get it gets a prize of some sort.
Yeah. Oh, that's good. Incentive. This episode of the Music Tech Teacher podcast is brought to you by the Midnight Music Community. The Midnight Music Community is an online space for music teachers who'd like help using technology in their music lessons. There are online courses, video tutorials, lesson plans, music tech news, and professional development certificates are provided for any training that you undertake. I'm inside the community every day, personally answering members' questions and sharing tips and ideas. The best thing is that you get to connect with hundreds of other music teachers just like you and share your own experiences and occasional music tech frustrations. For more information and a special joining price just for the listeners of this podcast, visit midnightmusic.com.au/podcast offer. That's midnightmusic.com.au/podcast offer. And practicalities of recording your lectures. I'm actually planning in the future. I know you and I are both lovers of screencasting and things like that, creating their own screencast videos. I actually really enjoy doing that. So, for those that don't know, this is where you basically have something showing on your computer screen and you've got some software on your computer which will allow you to record what goes on your screen and also your voice over the top if you choose. So I use ScreenFlow. I think you might too as well, do you, George?
Yeah.
Yeah,
I use ScreenFlow too.
Yeah, and it's a Mac-only software, but there's equivalents for PC like Camtasia and some other choices. But I really enjoy the art of the ScreenFlow video or the Screencast video where you just hit record and do some sort of teaching, and I find it a lot of fun. So is that what you're mostly doing? Is that or you're not sort of showing yourself on the camera talking to the camera?
I'll put a little brief video of me in the corner or something like that, but they don't it actually it's very similar to the way I teach in my labs. I set the labs up backwards. The teacher station is behind the students.
Yep.
Because I need to see what they're doing on their screen. So I want behind them and then we're projecting up front. And so it's kind of the same thing. They don't really need to look at me to be able to teach this stuff. And they need to be looking at what I'm doing. Yeah. And so that's, but I've been, my method of working on this has evolved quite a bit. Part of it had to do with necessity, just finding audio time when I can actually record audio without a lot of noise in the background. But I pretty much record the video and the audio separately now.
Yeah, and it's funny because I've shifted a little bit. I decided I have two styles of screencasting, and I'm actually thinking about doing a whole episode just about screencasting because people, when I mention it in workshops, everyone pricks their ears up and is quite fascinated by A, the fact that you can do this because a lot of people don't realise, and then B, how do you go about this and what's the best practice or the workflow? And it's funny, I started out doing nearly all of mine quite scripted and definitely the audio separately recorded first, and then I would do the screencast, the actual, what goes on visually, and then I'd match the two up, and I still do that. If I'm doing sort of the professional, in inverted commas, that style of video, I'll do that option. But nowadays, if I know the material well enough, I'll just try and do it all in one go on the fly a little bit more, and there's so much less editing time involved. So I'm really loving that at the moment.
What I found is that there's too much extraneous noise. Like I don't like mouse clicks and all of that other stuff. And so what I actually do is I do just the reverse. I record the visual first.
Do you? Oh, so interesting.
And I talk my way through it. I do the talking all the way through it, so I know exactly what I'm doing, but it removes all of the mouse clicks, the bumping of the table like I just did there.
Yeah, right.
And it also removes
Yep. That's it.
And so I then after I've recorded the video, then I go back and I just look and say, okay, what do I need to say here? And then it's much more concise.
Yeah.
I find that it works a lot faster. I mean, for me anyway, that's...
Yeah, I should maybe try that too, and just to compare methods, because there is no right or wrong. And in my research, because I was fascinated by this question of how do people go about it, and when I first started doing it and looking into it, it was very difficult to find information about the way people go about sort of the best practice side of things. And that was what I ended up doing. And then lots of people get fascinated with the way I do it. But yeah, it's just really interesting. I think things work differently. And yeah, I'm finding at the moment my on the fly kind of ones. Is that what you say? Yeah, is that the right expression?
Yeah.
Yeah. On the fly
so.
version. Yeah. That's just been so much quicker for me. And I make a quick 95. I do the clap thing, in audio recording. I've told people in workshops before, often in audio recording, if you make a mistake, you can put a clap, do a clap in the recording so that you can easily see the point at which you need to edit. I don't know if you ever use that technique, but I do it a lot if I'm recording a podcast episode on my own. It's just me solo talking. If I mess one bit up, too much, then I will clap so that I can really easily pinpoint the part that I need to take out, and I can sort of visually scan through the audio waveform, and that works really well. So with these screencasts that I've been doing sort of more on the fly, I've done the same thing. So if I mess something up bad enough, then I'll just do a clap and then go back and remove that part. And it saves watching the entire video. Yeah, it's really good. So because sometimes you might record, yesterday I recorded back-to-back 2 25-minute videos, and so 50 minutes in total. And when you come to editing, man, you just don't really want to watch the entire 50 minutes through again just to see if everything was okay. And I've learnt to make little notes on a piece of paper as I go, where I need to remove something or check something later on, and saves listening to the whole thing. So it's a good technique.
Yeah, there's nothing worse than posting a video and then watching it and realize, oh my gosh.
Yeah, what the hell?
What did I do?
And I realised that other people must use this same method. I was watching someone else's instructional video about something. It was in a private forum situation, nothing music related, sort of business related video. And someone had commented underneath the video saying, hey, there's this weird clap around the 3.5 minute mark. and then I had, by the time I watched the video, they had re-uploaded a version and edited it out. But, the person who made it commented underneath and said, oh, yep, that wasn't supposed to be there. And I thought, she uses the same method as me. And so have you found that your students have gone on themselves to use, a flipped classroom model or even the project-based learning thing? Are they now using it with, in their own personal lives, music education lives?
Not as much as I'd like, to be honest. But also, in the last 10, 11 years, I really haven't been teaching teachers.
Yeah.
At the conservatory, these are students who intend to be professionals, professional performers or composers and things. So some of them go on into graduate school and then go into teaching, and I think they are using it to some extent. But I would say it hasn't really caught on as well as it should in music in particular. But at the same time, if you think about it, project-based learning is kind of what we do anyway.
Yeah, I was going to say that too. Yeah, we sort of just naturally do that as musicians. I mean, often the project is, I have a song to learn, and then so you sit there and you go, okay, well, I need to learn the lyrics first, or I need to learn the chords, or we'll get the sheet music or whatever, and you work from there, and you might be performing with a band or an ensemble, and it's a project in itself, and it's totally, we sort of just do that naturally.
It would be nice if in the U.S. a lot of the music teaching is ensemble, band, choir, and that. It would be nice if teachers moved to a more student-centered approach and more project-based, where the students have to know more about the music and where they learn more holistically rather than just learning to perform it. And some teachers obviously are doing that, but not nearly enough, and certainly not when I was in band.
No, and I think that it's changed so much. When I was growing up, and our system is very different here. Band, orchestra, choir is extracurricular activities here in Australia. So the teachers of those ensembles are fighting for time to run the ensemble, and squeezing rehearsals in around everything else. And general music is our main music that goes on during the school day. So it's quite different, but yeah, we just had such a different experience with those ensembles. to the way things are or could be now. I mean, I presume that some are still run the same way when I was growing up. But, you know, with the technology involvement, there's so many different options for you. And the flipped classroom thing, I think, works really well for that. And I do know a couple of teachers. There's one teacher here I know of in Australia who does quite a bit of recording of himself playing all the separate parts of an ensemble, and then he will upload those to an online space where students can access them ahead of the ensemble rehearsal. And so the students can learn their parts, or have a go at least, and play along with him. And he does slow versions and faster versions, and then versions which have the other parts playing in the background, and then, you know, all combinations of everything. And so by the time they get to rehearsal, they kind of get to spend a bit more time on the niceties, you know, like the dynamics and the phrasing and all those things are very hard to get to until the end usually of the process. So yeah, so I think it's good. So tell us about notation software. You know, you and I have both been involved with notation software for quite some years. And I mean, my background at first was with Sibelius, and then later on I discovered, you know, this free program called MuseScore, and I thought, wow, this is really cool. I mean, it opens up the option of using notation software for lots of people who just can't afford Sibelius and Finale, because at that time, really, they were the only two other main options. And I thought MuseScore was so great, and I ended up making a few tutorial videos for it, and then the people who run the program actually got in contact with me, and we had this whole thing, and I ended up making 10 or 11 videos as the introductory MuseScore videos. And then later down the track, of course, they got version 2 of the software out, and at the time I just did not have the time to spend making another set of videos, which was unfortunate. But I can't remember if I put your name forward or if they just stumbled across you, but you ended up making the second lot. So that was pretty cool. And yeah, and so, I mean, but in addition to MuseScore, I mean, you were a Finale user before that. You've been mainly Finale at first, was it, that you were using?
Well, when I first started, Finale was really the only option.
The only one, yeah, yep. And then Sibelius was a bit later.
I started Finale version 1.
Yeah, right.
And then I was introduced to Sibelius on the Acorn computer.
Yep.
When it first showed up in the U.S., and it really didn't have much in the way of distributors. And to get Sibelius, you had to buy the computer too.
Yeah.
And so that was kind of it took a little while before they switched it, and so that it was available on Windows and the Mac, and then all of a sudden it started to take off. But I've used just about every notation software program in the last 25 years. There was, Overture and Mosaic and Music Press, which was an incredible program, but it never really took off. Igor, Engraver. I don't know if you knew any of those.
I've heard of Igor, but not Music Press. Not familiar to me at all.
Music Press was from was the notation software from the Synclavier.
Oh.
It was based on that. It was fantastic. It was so beautiful. It was the best look. It's still, in my opinion, the best looking notation software I've ever seen.
Wow.
But it just, and I think it sort of exists still in some nebulous netherworld somewhere, but I can't find it anymore. But it was a great program. So now Music Press, MuseScore has been something that I've been working with quite a bit. And then, of course, I wrote a book on Notion. And it's,
Yep, that's the other one too.
And what I've really come to the conclusion is that we have to stop looking at notation software as just being engraving.
Yeah.
We always compare it to Finale and Sibelius because we're looking for, engraver qualities. So, most of us don't need engraver quality.
I know. And it's taken, I mean, I've come to that lately too, because there are now so many other choices. And in early days, really, there was mainly Sibelius and Finale only to choose from. But, and they are awesome programs, both of them. They both do excellent jobs, and they're both used widely by all the publishers in the world. But, in reality, the average teacher or student just needs about, a very small percentage of their amazing features. And if you're not going to be doing massive ensemble arrangements or compositions or film scoring and stuff, you frequently don't really need all those features. So it's great we've got all these other options.
Even film scoring, back in the day, the program that film scorers used wasn't Finale, it was Encore.
Yeah.
because it was fast and easy and it was good enough.
Yeah.
Because so they'd crank out the parts and put it out there. And it was almost all of the film scorers used Encore at the time. Nowadays, they don't even use notation software at all. A lot of them are just using DAWs.
Yeah, that's right. And some poor bunny gets to take the MIDI file and translate it into some notation format for the orchestral players, which is hard work, I think.
So I think it's really important, particularly for teachers, to realize that you don't probably need Finale, you don't probably need Sibelius, and you don't probably need Dorico. They're all wonderful programs, and if you're going to publish your work, then yes, you absolutely need it. But if you just need to crank something out for tomorrow's rehearsal, you need something a lot faster. And to me, the fastest one out there right now is Notion.
Yeah, and it's one of its superpowers also is the sounds available. I mean, it sounds amazing compared to some of the more, computerized type sounds of the other programs. But yeah, that was its sort of focus early on, wasn't it? It was really about the sound.
Yeah, well, it was both that and others. And really what it was is that Jack Jarrett, who was the head of composition at Berkeley, was the one who developed it. And, he was also the developer of Music Printer Plus way back when, the DOS program. And it was really a toy for him more than anything else. But yes, he wanted it to sound good. And it does. It's a brilliant program. And in fact, it also has live playback that's just really quite amazing. And they're using it on Broadway.
Yeah, right. Oh, that's so interesting.
And so you basically you put the score into Notion, and then you tap a key, and you just follow the conductor.
Yeah, fantastic.
And it really works. And Sibelius and Finale both have that kind of feature, but it doesn't work as well as it does in Notion.
It's a little bit hard work to make it happen.
But what I found is it was just so intuitive to learn. There's so many fewer shortcuts because each shortcut will do more than one thing. So like if you want to add a repeat, you hold the repeats is a colon.
Yep, which makes
sense.
So
the two dots
like
make sense.
Yep.
But if you press it once, you get a forward repeat. If you press it twice, you get a backward repeat. If you press it a third time, you get first and second endings.
Ah, excellent.
And so you don't have to remember three different shortcuts. It's one.
Yeah.
And they do that all over the place.
Yeah, that's really good.
And it really it made it so that I learned it so that I could write the book, but I learned it so fast I couldn't believe it. So teachers need to recognize what program is going to be the most use for them. Another option really for teachers is NoteFlight. It's just a great program, and it's getting better every minute.
Yeah.
They just recently announced now that they're connected into Soundtrap, which is online GarageBand.
I know,
basically.
how exciting was that? I saw that come up on Facebook the other day. Yeah, and I think I loved the comment on Facebook. NoteFlight's been one of the ones that I've suggested a lot in recent times because it does enough. It does enough for you to get some basic ensemble stuff done and worksheets, whatever you're doing with students. And it's a great one for students to learn too because there's not all these extra buttons and things they need to worry about like in some of the more fully fledged programs. So it's just a great choice.
Yeah, a lot of people complained about the new interface, but I actually thought it improved it quite a bit.
Oh, I did too. Really, I didn't hear complaints. No, I like it a lot, and it sort of made it more consistent across the board. And it's great. Just the way it works across all devices. It's one of the first software programs to truly work across all software devices, pretty much in the same way. And it's just been great. It simplifies things a lot when I'm running workshops with multiple people from different schools who all have, PCs and Macs and iPads and Android devices and everything. It's just a great solution there.
But then, of course, we have to assume that the internet's going to work.
Well, that's true, yeah. The only drawback. And then, here's the contingency plan. Get out the staff paper and that's okay. Absolutely. And you've told me that you're doing some professional development stuff as well over summer and with an online school as well. So tell us a bit more about that.
Well, one of the things we've noticed is that teachers complain about professional development all the time, music teachers in particular, because if they do professional development in an in-service at their school, it's rarely has anything to do with music.
Yeah, I hear it too all the time.
And then they have to use their summers to get the credits and that they need, and so that vacation time is pretty important, I think, actually, for regenerating and recharging, and it's expensive. They if they don't have a university in their town, they have to go travel and they have to stay there overnight and all this stuff, and it ends up costing a lot of money. And so we started looking at what was happening in online education, and what I found is that there's not very much for music. There are a number of places like the Connecting Link that'll offer education classes, and but they're reasonably inexpensive. And there's actually a couple of places that'll let you get your continuing ed units for really, really cheap. But there was nothing for music. And, there's a few classes here and there, but mostly individuals offering it. And, Music First has started to coordinate some classes that are related to their programs. But we wanted to get something that was online that was quality and affordable and convenient. And so we're starting to teach, we're starting to offer some music classes, and they're not necessarily technology classes, though there will be some technology classes involved. But our first two classes, one's on music theory and the next one's on special music ed. And what we're going to do is we're going to have two different types of classes. One will be professor-led, where we'll actually meet the students, online using video conferencing software each week, and so it's a structured class. And then we'll also have the self-paced classes that are available too. But our intent is to make sure that the price is considerably less than anything that they're paying right now that we can find online. And then the other thing is that we're intending to make it so that the professors, the teachers that are offering these classes, are going to be the ones that make most of the money. So we want to take care of them, because adjuncts are probably the most unfairly treated people in the entire education industry.
Yeah, so true.
They're just abused. And so we want to make it so that they can decide, they have more control. So there's not going to be much in the way of overhead. We're going to have the technology put together so that they can do it all. But there's not a lot of administration and anything like that. We're not building swimming pools and stuff. And so that's basically our goal. And we've partnered with Adams State University in Colorado to be able to offer credits, and the credits are very reasonable. They're $55 each, and so it's going to be a way for people to take care of some of their professional development at a reasonable cost, in the convenience of their own home.
Yeah, that's really great. And, it is really hard to find decent professional development, like you said. And that's the comment I hear a lot, is that a lot of what's offered at schools is, very generalized, and so therefore not music specific. And, music teachers sometimes have a hard time applying what they've learnt to the specifics of the music subject. And it can be really difficult to apply that and work out, how it can be relevant for you. So it's much easier when you've got someone showing you and giving you lesson ideas who's qualified to do that. And special music ed is a big hot topic really at the moment. I'm finding I get asked quite a bit about that too. In Australia here, we've had a bit of a change with our curriculum, and it's kind of a requirement across, it's a bigger requirement than it was in the past to have some sort of element of special ed involved with your classes. So so it's a really good topic. We will include a link in the show notes to find, if people want to find more information out about that, so they can check it out. I'll grab that from you after we've spoken. So, and links to anything else that we can think of that we've covered as well. Excellent. Anything else you'd love to tell us before we sign off?
No, other than it's always a pleasure to talk to you. Oh,
thank you, and to you too. I'm hoping we'll catch up in person. I know I say this to everybody I chat to on the podcast, but it's true. I feel, we're often quite isolated here in Australia, so it's easier for everyone in the States to catch up with each other at all the conferences there. So I'm hoping again to get across to the Texas Music Educators Conference next year, so that will take care of meeting up with a few people. But I don't know if you're intending to go to that, or if you've ever been to that one before.
Well, it's too late to apply. So,
yeah, I got in the nick of time, literally in the nick of time. And it was because someone posted something on Facebook and then I got an email and literally like with hours to spare, less than hours actually, not even multiple hours, but I did squeeze it in there, I think.
But at least I am still on this side of the world, so there's a chance we'll catch up.
I know. It's so true. It's so true. Yeah. You're one of the only ones actually. And it's great. Our time zones weren't too different for talking today.
Right.
So I'm often talking to people when it's 6 a.m. my time, which is much better time for the States, but not so much here. So
I'm doing the same.
Yeah.
When I talk to people in the States.
You get very good at translating and converting time zones. I'm an expert. I can pretty much name any time of our day. I can tell you what time it is in New York. So good to talk to you. Thanks so much, George, for spending some time today. And as I mentioned, we'll put some links in the show notes, more information about things that we've mentioned today. And I hope to catch up with you soon.
Okay, thanks.
All right, thanks.
Take care, Katie.
The Music Tech Teacher podcast is hosted by me, Katie Wardrobe. You can find more information and links from today's episode at midnightmusic.com.au/22. Thanks for listening and see you next time.